I'm Sonia Carreno, the president of the Interactive Advertising Bureau of Canada, and have been in the digital advertising industry since the IAB has been around. So almost 25 years now. And I'm really excited to be talking to you this morning about all the things that are happening in today's media environment.
Well, Sonia, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Good to be here.
And before we get started, a congratulations. You were recently inducted or nominated into the Canadian Marketing, Advertising, PR, and Communications Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was a great honor, and I was very humbled to be amongst a very impressive list of peers and other industry members. So that was a big deal for certainly for me. It was a highlight of my career.
Awesome. So, third-party cookies. Let's talk about third-party cookies. Let's talk about privacy. This has been part of our environment, our ecosystem for many years now. 2022 is looking to be a cookieless landscape. How did we get here, and why did we get here?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is. I don't know whether you recall the year of mobile. The year of mobile ended up being the decade of the year of mobile. So, often our colleagues will joke and say, well, what year of the year of mobile? And similarly, I think we've been talking about a cookieless environment for many years now. And that's largely because of the fact that consumers have really expressed a lot of distaste in really being, retargeted, followed around the web. There's been a lot of bad publicity around privacy issues. You've seen the movies on Netflix, and there's a lot of conflation also in areas of, privacy as it pertains to advertising, and then privacy as it pertains to more nefarious things like elections and fraud and those types of areas that are a little bit darker in context. And so I think that it's been a long time coming, and the industry has been doing its best to address some of these issues, but really it's largely been band-aids. Trying to improve the ad experience, trying to make sure that the ads aren't as intrusive, trying to make sure that there's appropriate frequency capping so that people aren't followed around the web, and then bombarded over and over again with the same message, those types of things. I think we still have a long way to go, despite the fact that cookies are still, being deprecated by 2022. I think there's still a huge gap in education and really the understanding that a consumer has of the what you get as a result of being exposed to advertising, and that sort of unspoken model of here's a lot of free content in exchange for the ability to show some ads that are relevant to you. So I think that there's still work to be done there. I wish that we had a better response to that, but here we are.
Yeah. What does this mean for advertisers in terms of tracking and targeting across the web? Programmatic has been growing. And I'm curious what this means for programmatic, what it means for advertising in general.
Yeah, I think it's a big sea change. It's one of the biggest changes to the industry, and it's a big shakeup. That's why the IAB internationally called the efforts around this Rearc, right? Re-architecting the web, re-architecting the way that we think about addressable audiences. And I think that marketers, what changes for them is in the short term, yeah, there's a little bit of confusion around how to be able to sort of think about the three different ways. I think let's take a step back and understand that in 2022, when the cookies are finally sunsetted, it's not going to be one answer. It's not going to be one way to do business online. And so I think that for marketers, it means that they need to be prepared to look at three different basic options of reaching addressable audiences on the web. One is going to be through universal IDs or unified IDs, and that is consented authenticated audiences. The other way is through contextual signaling, which means that, having a really good understanding of your own audiences and your own data, and then being able to parlay that into an ecosystem that sort of reflects contextual advertising and maps back to your understanding of your audience, and in a highly algorithmic and AI sort of based fashion. Which is very exciting. And then the third way is the one that's making a lot of noise, over the past couple of weeks, and that is the cohort approach, which is, the privacy sandbox by Google, putting a stand against, tracking people across various destinations, and rather than targeting individuals, targeting against groups of individuals that are put into, similarly like contextual boxes. These are audiences that have common attributes that advertisers will be able to reach. So I think that, understanding first and foremost that there's not going to be one silver bullet answer to when the cookies are gone, right? So there's not one thing that you should be focusing on, but rather prepare for the fact that your data is now going to have to be groomed and prepared to interoperate with various ways of reaching audiences. Certainly in the short term, we'll see what happens in the midterm and long term.
It almost sounds like there's a huge opportunity for marketers.
Yes, huge. There's a huge opportunity for marketers, and there's also a huge opportunity for them to work with their agencies to be able to map out strategic customer data platform setups, and to be able to sort of use the agency expertise or their partner expertise on how to lay this stuff out. So if you look at scenario one, what does that mean, and how do we need to think about our first party audience data and all of the different data stores that we have? How do they connect? How do we map them? How do we prepare them for scenario one? How do we map them for scenario two, using all the resources that we have available to us, as well as keeping track of what is the industry doing in terms of standards, creating standards around this stuff. As an example, IAB Tech Lab is putting out or continuing to develop the audience taxonomy, and a program called datalabel.org, which is all about creating transparency in the marketplace, as well as standardization, so that when you're looking at contextual mapping or you're looking at audience cohorts, you're using the same language, so that when you're talking to the marketplace and you're saying, I want to have a car intender audience, then at the same time you're looking at your audience data and ensuring that you're using the same taxonomy that the industry will be using at large. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done right now on bringing the pieces together, having a clear understanding of where the puck is going, to make a Canadian reference. It could be, because that's where we are, but watch where the puck is going, right? And skate in that direction, as opposed to just trying to stay very insular. You need to look at where things are headed, and then plan and strategize against that. So I think that there is, enormous opportunity. And I like, what I personally particularly like about this era right now, or where we are, is the fact that there's so much collaboration, and partnerships are starting to blossom again, because we need each other. And we need to have really good discussions and intelligent discussions. And it's the more the merrier.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Interesting.
It's good.
You mentioned, Sonia, a number of initiatives that the IAB is undertaking. You talked about the Tech Lab. You talked about Rearc. I'm wondering if you can take a moment to really drill down into maybe one of the projects or one of the initiatives that the IAB is undertaking, maybe something that you're involved in, to really address these issues around privacy and data and cookies. And yeah, I'm wondering if you could take some time with that.
Sure, I can actually cover three
Sure.
in the time that we have, and because they're all so interconnected. So Rearc very quickly broke into three different working groups. One was addressable audiences, two was accountability, and three was the creation of a global privacy framework. And so, looking at the first one, addressable audience was all about, okay, how are we going to do this? And getting all of the, the smartest people, the smartest engineers around the world together in, weekly and sometimes more than once a week, really like a cerebral discussion around what does this look like? What are some alternatives? What can we do technically? If not the cookie, then what? And so out of that group came a couple of different things, and I alluded to them earlier. The idea of, okay, there's the option of authenticated audiences, which means that you know who the target is and you're able to continue to track them in a very highly consented way, and ensuring that there's pseudonymized information there, like so there's no the audiences are de-identified. Number two is the idea of, there's going to be contextual signaling that we can do. And that means that the publishers are going to work with greater networks to be able to map their data and create contextual relevance for audiences. And then number three is going to be looking at the cohorts. And so the addressable working group put out a framework in March, mid-March, that would be out for public commentary, and we expect that is going to be finalized in the coming weeks, and that's basically just frameworks for technically how will this work, what are the things that we need to standardize, what needs to happen now, next steps, and how does this play into the privacy privacy sandbox with Google. Number two is the accountability one. And this was a working group that is all about building frameworks on how do we ensure compliance? How do we ensure that there's no data leakage? If we're going to go with authenticated audiences, then where does that information sit? And how do you, as a marketer, prove that you have consented audiences all the way across your transactions? So it's highly relevant right now because of the fact that there's such a patchwork of different regulations around the world. So you need to have some sort of standardization around what does compliance look like, what does accountability look like, what kind of records do we need, how much is too much, what kind of data storage are we going to need for this kind of stuff in the next iteration of the internet, because cookies didn't require as much centralized sort of data storage, that type of thing. So, again, framework released mid-March, and we expect that will also be a very useful tool for the privacy sandbox, and for engineers as we crack into 2022. And then finally, and most importantly, and one where we've been very, very active, is the global privacy framework. And the global privacy framework is all about really addressing the variant legislative approaches to privacy across the globe. And so the GDPR, Canada is interesting in that we sit really in the middle between the GDPR in Europe and the US. In fact, I would sort of, describe us as being closer to Iceland than closer to the US when it comes to our privacy, the way that our government looks at privacy. And so that puts us in a really interesting position where we need to really look more towards the European standards as opposed to the US standards for our own compliance, but still being able to sort of, play within the North American marketplace. So we're kind of in an interesting position there. So when the GDPR hit in 2018, IAB Canada was very involved with the European IABs as they were developing the GDPR transparency and consent framework, which is now widely adopted in Europe for programmatic advertising, right? And so to get consented bid requests. And so what we have done over the past couple of years is we've worked with IAB Europe to bring the TCF into Canada. And as we start working on Rearc and the cookieless world, the tech lab, as we're all developing this together, the tech lab is like, okay, well, maybe it makes sense for us to build a global framework then, because we also know that Brazil's coming out with a new law, and there's like 50 billion new laws coming out state by state in the US. Mm-hmm. So why don't we build one global framework where the TCF can sort of sit and be scalable across all markets, and we can sort of use the same framework across markets. So we're very excited about that one. Also released mid-March. Our TCF Canada policies were out for public commentary in March and have come back. A lot of really great industry discussion. And so we expect that TCF Canada, or the Canadian version of the Global Privacy Framework, to be the first in the world to be tested. So yeah, it's very exciting for us. And it really helps us to modernize our compliance in Canada with not only PIPEDA as it stands now, but with CPPA, which is anticipated either this year or even some sort of a version of like the GDPR like CPPA. In if there's an election, then with the new government as well, or the same government. But we anticipate those amendments to come.
Wow, a lot of changes, not just in Canada, but around the world. Sonia, we have listeners here in Canada, in Europe as well, and really around the world. Where would you recommend they go to keep up to date, really, on what's happening?
Well, I think that, keep up to date. Okay, here's a couple of things. And, we just had our town hall yesterday. Number one is try to stay away from just the headlines, right? So try not to, as hard as it might be, don't look at all the juicy headlines that are coming out on LinkedIn, and try also to stay away from the political undertones of what is being said, and try to focus more on the meat and the actual technical content of what you're hearing about. So continue to look at industry publications, continue to look at, intelligent, more in-depth studies, really look at what the regulators are putting out. So if there's reports, or if there's, some sort of privacy standards that are being tweaked, really important to stay on top of that. Work with your trade bodies. So if you are an advertiser, if you're working with an advertiser association or an agency association, or the IAB, of course, lean in. Now is the time. It's 25. This industry is 25 years old. 25 years in now, like a quarter of a century, and we are about to change everything. So you have an opportunity. If you came in like 10 years ago and you had a status quo sort of to work within, now is your chance to actually be part of the reinvention of this. I can't stress that enough. So don't be on the sidelines. Be part of the conversations, join the working groups, be active. And that's the best way that you're going to learn, and also be prepared for what matters most. That's my advice.
Wonderful. Sonia, thank you so much for this discussion. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure this is not the last time that we'll discuss this topic, for sure.
Well, I look forward to discussing all of the new innovations that are coming out of this. So thank you very much for having me.
And thank you again.
Power your advertising. Working with Active International enables you to fund your advertising using your company's own products, assets, or even services. We have over 30 years' experience connecting and bringing value to businesses all over the globe, helping many brands scale up into household names. Want to achieve more from your marketing spend? Contact Active International today.